What's up, guys? You are about to hear the first two chapters of the upcoming audiobook, The Land Forging. Nick Liddell is a wizard. Anyway, I hope you really enjoy it. And as always, I couldn't do any of this without your support. Thank you so much for everything that you've helped me to become over the past year. So, enough of my goofy face. I hope you enjoy this. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
The Light Court. Figures moved at a stately pace along a white marble floor inlaid with veins of diamond. Others stood in their assigned places, the same places they had stood for years immemorial. There was never any need to be concerned that someone would step out of place in the Light Court. Roles and ceremonies had been established eons before and had not changed. They would never change. 3 bells chimed to announce the arrival of a new figure to the Light Court. In practiced measure, all turned to acknowledge the High Chancellor. The tall figure stood dressed in raiment of spun platinum. He took exactly 7 short steps forward in honor of the 7 higher planes and stood quietly. His movement had placed him in the center of a stylized golden sun set into the floor. The Chancellor stood for the predetermined amount of time that all entrants to the court were required to wait. No one knew exactly why that amount of time was required, but that did not matter. It was simply the way things were done. That was enough for all present, and if it wasn't, well, then they had all learned to make it appear that it was enough. No one spoke, and no one moved. 2 bells chimed, and the Chancellor bowed deeply once. He then walked 7 times 7 steps forward into the court. His precise stride brought him exactly to the center of another sun set into the pristine white marble. Once he stopped, the Chancellor bent into an elaborate bow, his head bent down. This sun was created from the red crystal heart of a dying sun. The period of waiting began again. No one spoke. This court was the heart of power for the armies of light. It had the sterile cleanliness of an operating room and the solemn gravity of a vigil. After a period of time, a 3rd bell tolled. The High Chancellor straightened and looked at his leader. The King of Light sat on his raised throne. The ivory chair was carved from the skull of a dragon god. It was well known that the king had enjoyed a good hunt before the exile. His trophies festooned the walls of the court. To the left of the throne was the tattered banner from the capital city of a civilization that had once spanned several galaxies. To the right was the massive spiraled horn of an evolved unicorn. One urn that sat on a pedestal behind the king's throne was rumored to be a stasis pod that contained the ashes of a phoenix that had heated a planet's core. No one ever discussed how the king had reached the phoenix. It was also never discussed why, instead of a planet, there was now only an asteroid belt. In a stately and regal voice, the king spoke.
The High Chancellor is welcome back to the one and true court. When last we spoke, I tasked you with discovering the source of the disturbances I felt in the land. I trust you have not come back without an answer.
The king's voice did not change in cadence or timbre while speaking, but the threat of horror and agony was understood. In an unspoken law more immutable than gravity, no one disappointed the King of Light. At least, no one did so twice. The High Chancellor bowed once again. His arms flowed out to his sides in a slow flourish. When he stood, he brought his hands together in a steeple over his chest. Indeed, my king. Since I was tasked with this assignment, I have turned my sole attention to the land. At first, I detected nothing out of the ordinary. There were no changes or realignments of ley line energy. There were also no significant alterations in the deep magics. I researched all of the myriad manifestations of power, but it was only when I began scanning for higher energies that I found something.
The king spoke again. Are you telling this court that a denizen of the land has discovered how to manipulate chaos or gravity?
The king did not even breathe into existence the possibility that one of the specks of life that inhabited the land could have stumbled upon the ability to use any of the stronger, higher energies, let alone the strongest. Time.
Not exactly, my king.
the Chancellor replied. Seeing the king's expression tighten slightly in impatience, he quickly continued. There have been no spells cast or manipulations of the higher energies that I could detect. What I did sense, however, were trace amounts of raw chaos in various locations around the world. The land, of course, has large or small amounts of every magic in existence, but as you know, chaos cannot remain in a stable form without a massive containment spell. So when I detected these sparks of energy and saw that they did not change in character, I was curious, to say the least. As I watched the locations where I had detected these chaotic energies, I noticed that there had been changes in the status quo permeating most of those regions. Nothing large enough to disturb our plans, but changes nonetheless. The king's nostrils flared ever so slightly. The Chancellor hastily corrected himself. Of course, I mean your plans, my king. He wasted no more time moving past his faux pas. Despite the changes in the land being minor, I found it concerning that your majesty detected disturbances at the same time I discovered these emanations of higher energy.
Where are these motes of chaos coming from?
I have not yet discovered that, my king.
Have you not found anything else?
The king asked. The leader of the Light Court did not seem pleased with the Chancellor's progress. If the platinum-clad being were mortal, he would have started sweating. As it was, he still felt a twinge of fear. I will continue to study these areas, my lord. I will divine more information, but something happened that I believe you should be made aware of immediately. A pixie chrysalis has been found. More than that, it has made its way into the hands of a sprite life master. The king absorbed the information in silence. None of our agents are in the area. It is in a small section of the land called the River Peninsula. At your order, I can start moving assets towards the region, the High Chancellor continued. The king just stared at him. The other members of the court looked at the High Chancellor, more than a few silently hoping for his death. Removal of someone from a position of power always opened the possibility for advancement, after all. The Chancellor pretended to ignore the attention, not daring to look away from the dais. There was no movement for a long period of time. Then a white-robed figure leaned forward and whispered into the king's ear. The royal chamberlain was the only other entity allowed near the throne. No one knew anything about him, except that he was a close adviser to the king. His white robes and deep hood hid any clear view of his face or body. He was smaller than most other members of the Light Court, but that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. Those who opposed the Chamberlain often found themselves on the wrong side of the king's favor. Death was the best result that could be expected after that. If there was one other figure in the court that the High Chancellor feared, it was the secretive figure in white. The Chamberlain finished giving his advice and then stepped back behind the throne once more. The king nodded to himself, lost in thought. When he looked at the High Chancellor again, he just thanked him for his service and bid him to continue watching the land closely. The Chancellor bowed again and walked out of the court. If the platinum-garbed figure's steps were not quite as slow and measured as before, no one watching would blame him. The king had dismissed the weakling Chancellor from his mind and from the court simultaneously. His thoughts. Chapter 1, Day 67, Hakor, 19, 15,368 EBG. Be welcome at the hearth tree, Richter of the Mist Village, Hisako said with a smile. And welcome home, my son. I see you have grown in strength, hopefully in wisdom as well. The last was said with a wry arch of her eyebrow. Thank you, Mother. Yes, I have learned much and found a good friend and ally, Sion replied with a smile. Richter walked forward and took her hand. Hearth-Mother, thank you. Sion is more than a friend to me. He is a brother. There's no way I could have accomplished what I have accomplished without him. I formally extend the friendship and welcome of the Mist Village to you and your people. I sincerely hope that you will ask me for any help that you might need. A serious look came over her face. I was hoping that you would say that. There have been small camps of goblins and bugbears seen in the forest between here and the Firetip Mountains to the east. They are slaughtering all of the local wildlife and despoiling the land. We need to clear them out and learn why they are making inroads into our territory. I will not stand by and watch the forest of Nadria become like the Whisper Woods, overrun with evil creatures. It must be protected, no matter how many battles it takes. Will you help?
You have been offered a quest. Protect the Forest 1. Bugbears and goblins have invaded the forest of Nadria and are disrupting nature's balance. The Hearth Mother is asking for your help. You must destroy an enemy camp. Optional. Find out why the invaders are coming into the forest. Reward unknown. Yes or no? Ready to take out some more bad guys? Richter asked Scion, smiling. Scion looked back with that bloodthirsty grin of his.
Oh, yes, brother. This is what we do.
Yeah, man! Now, like we practiced. Richter stuck his palm out, which Scion slapped with his own. Immediately, they slapped the backs of their hands together, then made fists, bumped them, drew their fists back, opening them slowly, closed them again, bumped them again, twisted their fists to lock it, then opened their hands quickly, and both said, "Boom!"
Hisako just stared at them with wide eyes and her mouth ajar. What are you doing? That is called giving dap, mother. You wouldn't understand,
Scion said with a laugh that was echoed by Richter. Shaking her head, she just turned around and walked to the hearth tree. The two of them followed, still chuckling. They left the golden glade of the wood sprites the next morning. Their armor was left behind as well. Their adventures so far had left holes, gouges, and dents in their gear. Unfortunately, the magical armor could not be repaired by a normal smith. The sprite magicians promised they would make it whole, but it would take at least a day. They decided to use the time to walk to Richter's concealed glade. Besides wanting to see Hisako, the other reason they had left the village was to collect water from the Pool of Clarity. The magical waters gave a 25% bonus to any experience earned over the course of a day. Richter had taken the waters for granted at first. He had later discovered that a potion of clarity normally sold for 2 to 3 gold pieces. Put another way, 1 vial was the equivalent of 3 to 4 months' wages for most people in the land. This wonderful little pond was going to be the cash cow that helped him grow the Mist Village as quickly as possible. Hisako had offered to send guards with them in light of the encroachment of bugbears into the forest, but despite the fact that they were now basically allies, he didn't feel comfortable disclosing such sensitive information, that is, where his glade was. Having guards come along would have been as good as drawing a map. The two companions set out just as the forest was coming alive. The bird song that Richter had first heard when coming to the land had grown more complex as the weather got warmer and more birds made the forest their home. The trip was relaxed and easy. Going without armor for the first time in weeks was also a freeing experience. Though invaluable, wearing his light armor did decrease his movement speed. According to Yulindi, an elf that had reached journeyman rank in the light armor skill, each piece of light armor decreased his speed by 3% at his novice rank. That meant when he was wearing the entire suit, he moved about 18% slower than he otherwise would have. Apparently, when he became an initiate, the penalty decreased to 2%, and then 1% at apprentice rank. Journeyman and so on, the speed penalty would disappear completely. Richter was really looking forward to that. Medium and heavy armor had even worse penalties to speed. Dodge, casting, and several other things were affected by heavier armor as well. These were all reasons that casters, rogues, or fighters specializing in ranged combat typically wore light armor. Despite the short distance between the hearth tree and the glade, finding their destination would normally not have been easy. It might have been near impossible, in fact, but the traveler's map Richter had bought let him retrace his steps exactly. Anywhere he had recently traveled showed up in bright colors on the map. Locations he had not visited personally, but the mapmaker had, were in grayscale. Everything else was pure black. It was interactive, so he could track his location and find his way unerringly to anywhere he had already been. Even so,
When the two friends approached the entrance to the small glade, there was nothing to indicate its presence, except the rocks Richter had strewn around, which would only be significant to him. The entry looked like nothing more than a stand of trees against a cliff face. Richter decided to test what Zetrix the imp had told him when he had first awoken in the land. When they were directly in front of the entrance, he turned to his companion. "Scion, walk in." "Walk in where?" the sprite asked. "There is nothing in front of us except for trees and cliff face." "Trust me," Richter said. "Just start walking forward." Scion looked at him in disbelief, but he did as he was asked. He put both hands out in front of him and tried to push past the trees. He didn't go more than 2 steps when he stopped. It was clear that he was leaning on some sort of barrier. The sprite moved several feet to his left and tried again. This time, his shoulders bunched as he pushed against whatever was in front of him. "Are you having a laugh at my expense, Richter? You are never really funny, but if so, then this is just pathetic." "Calm down," Richter said with a chuckle. "I was just testing something. When I first got here, an imp told me that no one else should be able to enter the glade. Looks like he was right." "An imp? You should not be interacting with those things. They are always causing mischief and problems." "He wasn't so bad," Richter said. "He gave me some good advice and information when I got here." "Trust me when I tell you that you were lucky. Everyone knows not to trust him. At least you don't owe it a favor." Yeah, Richter thought. He decided not to bring up that the imp had, in fact, tricked him into promising to do a future favor. No use talking about it now. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Well, like I said, the imp was useful. The point is, the entrance is right in front of you. It's just that an enchantment is keeping you out. Come with me. I'll walk you in. Richter held his hand out. Scion's face lost all expression. "What do you think you're doing?" "Well, you can't get in by yourself, obviously. So come hold my hand." Scion's sword was suddenly unsheathed. Richter held his hands up. "You can always wait out here, but there are a large number of herbs that grow inside. I haven't seen most of them anywhere else I've traveled so far, so they're probably pretty rare. Like I said, though, it's up to you." Scion's face screwed up in a pained expression. Richter could practically hear the sprite's teeth grinding. His companion shoved the sword back into its sheath with his uncannily fast attack speed. The next words were said with deadly intensity. "If you tell anyone about this, I will make you pay for it." Richter nodded innocently. With a look of complete understanding on his face, he extended his hand again. Muttering under his breath in the wood sprite home tongue, Scion clasped his friend's hand without making eye contact. The two of them walked forward together, and after only a few feet, Richter felt the light tingle over his skin that denoted when he entered the boundaries of the glade. Turning to Scion, he said, "Now, see there, little buddy, that wasn't so— Ow! You bastard!" Scion apparently did not appreciate Richter's attempt at gentle ribbing. He had drawn his sword and slapped the flat of it across the back of Richter's thighs. He didn't even have the good grace to say anything, merely sheathing his sword again and walking forward into the glen. Muttering about angry little Napoleons, Richter massaged the back of his legs and glared at his companion. Deciding nothing constructive would come from dragging the moment out, he let it go and examined a prompt that had come up. "You have brought a companion to your hidden enclave. Do you wish to allow this person access in the future, yes or no?" Selecting yes, he took in his surroundings. The small grassy area looked just as he remembered. Sunlight shone down through a break in the cliff face, illuminating a pool of water surrounded by a small meadow. Colorful flowers and herbs were strewn about the grass. The ache in his legs quickly fled his mind. Richter had forgotten the wonderful serenity of this place, and he took a few minutes to just appreciate the beauty around him. Coming back to himself, he walked with the slightest of hobbles over to the pool of clarity. After he had filled the first vial, he held it up to his eye. Richter was able to see motes of light floating through the crystal-clear water, a detail he had missed previously. After filling the pinky-sized vial, he placed it into the bag of holding and withdrew another empty vial with the same motion. While he was collecting the precious liquid, Scion seemed to be fascinated by the varied plant life. Richter heard him mutter,
Dragon's tongue, bloodwort, star lily, amaranthacap.
The sprite was so enthralled by the varied plant life in the glen that they ended up spending the night there. Their day was spent carefully gathering plants. They finished their herb collection for the night, and Scion's breathing was deep and regular in slumber. Richter was about to follow his companion's example when he noticed a faint glow coming from the pool. Moonlight was falling directly upon it, and a blue light was shining up from below, illuminating the water. Richter quietly got up from his sleep roll. He waded out until he was knee-deep and reached his hand into the pool. The blue gleam was coming from the floor of the pond. He scraped the mud and muck aside, dirtying the water. When it cleared, he saw a glowing blue rock. A prompt appeared. Know this. You have discovered a major find, the Glade of Serenity. This secret glade was the home of Karim the Knowledgeable. He was of a long-lived species, the Hanketsu, that were typically prone to quick anger and judgment. He turned from this path, however, and devoted his life to the study of the natural world. It was his belief that through the proper application of knowledge, one could create a society of just and fair laws. Feeling his death was near, he lay down by this simple pool and breathed his last. His death transformed it into a pool of clarity. The bones of the Hanketsu glow blue in the moonlight. A major find? In the game, that had meant more than the simple words would imply. The importance of certain sites had been ranked: interesting location, notable location, significant location, major find, important discovery, minor wonder, and grand wonder. The sites had grown more important and rarer the further down the list they had been. Most dungeons were either notable or significant locations. The fact that he had started at the site of a major find? Well, it helped explain why there was a concealing enchantment over the place. Richter's attention was pulled back to the blue light, and he realized then that he wasn't touching a rock. It was a skull. The skull of Karim the Knowledgeable. Standing in the slightly too cool waters of the pool, Richter bowed his head and stood silently. He would never know who this man was, but he honored him. He stood silent vigil over the bones and thanked the being who had dedicated his life to a worthy cause, and he quietly thanked him for the help the pool provided. When he was done, he left the water and lay down for sleep. The next morning, Scion enlisted Richter's help again to pick every remaining plant and herb that could be useful, and then place them in his bag. One wonderful trait of the bag of holding that Richter hadn't been aware of initially was that it either stopped or severely slowed decay. Food that was placed in the bag and then removed days later did not lose any of its freshness. The bag was not a form of cryogenic freezing, unfortunately. A simple experiment had proven that. A live fish, fresh from the water, had been placed inside. It was most definitely not alive when he pulled it back out, even a few seconds later. On the plus side, it was still tasty. They set out that afternoon, the glade almost stripped bare of herbs. Richter received an unexpected bonus from the time they spent when he was notified that his herb lore skill had increased. They would have been done faster, but Scion spread seeds of the collected plants in the glen and then watered them. The sprite said he was planning to do the same once he returned to the Mist Village. The meadow above the village proper had already shown itself to be naturally fertile ground for various plants. The bag of holding would keep everything viable until they got back home. They walked back to the hearth tree, enjoying the warm day. Spring was present now, in full effect, and everywhere Richter looked, small animals were scurrying about. The hearth tree was less than a day's walk from the hidden glade, so they took their time. Richter examined his status. It was remarkable how far he had come in such a short time. They were met at the edge of the glade by a female sprite.
"Well met, Sionavar,"
she said. "Well met, Daniela," Scion responded, sounding annoyed. "I have told you to call me Scion." She simply laughed.
"The Hearth Mother wants the two of you to come to the tree. Follow me."
The three of them started walking towards the massive tree. Richter was able to successfully fight the impulse for all of 10 seconds. So, Sionovar, huh? I don't want to talk about it. Whatever you say, Sionovar. Sion half drew his sword again and pointedly looked at Richter's legs. The laughter trailed off into a bout of coughing. When they arrived in front of the hearth tree, Hisako was standing with 3 other sprites. Each of them moved slowly and deliberately. It was clear they had lived for many years, but they were still hale.
Welcome back, Richter of the Mist Village. Welcome back, my son. Were you able to retrieve the supplies you needed?
Richter smiled and said, "Yes. In fact, I would like to give you a small gift." He pulled 10 potions of clarity from his bag. One he placed in her hand, and the others he laid at her feet. When she saw the motes of light in the vials, her own eyes began to sparkle.
This is a wonderful gift. Thank you.
It is a small token of appreciation for what you have given me. I am sure you have many wonders associated with your place of power, Hisako. I would like it if, in addition to helping each other with defense, we could become trading partners as well. I know we could both profit from this arrangement. The sparkle in her eyes was replaced with a crafty gleam.
I am sure we can come to some arrangement in the future. I am not sure our relationship is quite strong enough for a standing trade agreement right now, however. Perhaps if you employ an experienced trader, we can discuss it again. If we do become trading partners, however, do not expect special treatment just because you are friends with my son.
Richter was confused by her refusal, but then a prompt came up. Know this. Your trade level is too low to create an agreement. The stronger the relationship between 2 civilizations, the lower the level of trader required. Richter nodded to himself, the rebuttal now making more sense. Not wanting to make the situation awkward, he gave a small laugh and answered, I wouldn't have it any other way, Hearthmother. I wouldn't have it any other way. She gave a laugh of her own.
Well, enough talk of state. We have repaired your old armor, but you won't need it anymore. I think you will like what we have for you instead.
The tired-looking elders moved out of the way. What was behind them took his breath away. You have found Sprite Helmet of Mana, Defense plus 13, Durability 30 of 30, Item Class Unusual, Quality Superb, Weight 1.3 kilograms, Traits plus 44 to Mana. You have found Sprite Breastplate of Brawn, Defense plus 19, Durability 60 of 60, Item Class Unusual, Quality Superb, Weight 6.1 kilograms, Traits plus 8 to Strength. You have found Hardened Sprite Bracers, Defense plus 13, Durability 30 of 30, Item Class Unusual, Quality Superb, Weight 3.0 kilograms, Traits plus 7 to Dexterity. You have found Studded Sprite Gauntlets, Defense plus 13, Durability 40 of 40, Item Class Unusual, Quality Superb, Weight 2.2 kilograms, Traits plus 10 to Climbing. You have found Greaves of the Wood Sprite, Defense plus 15, Durability 45 of 45, Item Class Unusual, Quality Superb, Weight 2.8 kilograms, Traits 10% improved movement speed. You have found Reinforced Sprite Boots, Defense plus 15, Durability 35 of 35, Item Class Unusual, Quality Superb, Weight 1.8 kilograms, Traits plus 15 to Silence. You have found a complete armor set, Enhanced Sprite Armor. Bonus, defense given by each piece increased by 25%. Special bonus, 50% less noise made while moving through forest, plus 20% earth resistance.
Hisako looked at him and chuckled. Close your mouth, Richter. That's how you catch flies.
Hisako, this is too much.
This is well within my power, Richter. My son is wearing an almost identical set of enhanced armor. The resistances are different, and there are 1 or 2 other small variations, but otherwise you are now wearing the armor of a sprite warrior. We fight for the good of the Forest of Nadria, and you have proven that you do as well. The least that I can do is to give you better protection.
Richter looked at Scion. You've been wearing enhanced armor this whole time? And I was the one that had to run from the giant skeeling?
What giant skeeling?
Hisako asked, confused. Scion looked at the ground and kicked it with his foot. Richter looked at the stats of the gauntlets. And increased climbing? Is that how you always make it into the trees so easily? When I asked, you said I just needed to apply myself. Richter's voice was getting louder. Scion looked up with a smirk on his face. And your strength? I asked you how you were so strong when you were so much smaller than me. You told me it was because of secret sprite exercises. You made me do all of those push-ups! Richter's hands leaped out to choke the little man, who was now cackling with abandon. Richter was sure he heard chuckles from behind him, too, but he stayed focused on the manipulative leprechaun in front of him. Violence would most definitely have ensued if Hisako had not placed herself between the two of them.
Peace, Richter, peace. My son has a lot of growing up to do. I am sure he is sorry.
Scion kept laughing and shook his head. Richter glared at his companion. Tears were coming out of the bastard's eyes now.
Ignore him, Richter. Look at what else we have for you.
Richter exhaled heavily. Okay, Hisako. You're still a dick, Scion.
Scion, that was not funny,
she half-heartedly admonished. Was that a note of suppressed laughter in her voice? When Richter looked at her, all he saw was her normal serene mask, so he couldn't be sure. Still, not quite trusting her calm exterior, he decided to let the matter drop. For now, anyway. He would be getting even with Scion at some point, though. Hisako looked at one of the older sprites, who nodded back. He went inside of the hearth tree and came immediately back out. His arms were holding something. When he shook out his burden, though, Richter whistled softly in appreciation. You have found Cloak of Concealment. Defense plus 10. Durability 30 of 30. Item class rare. Quality superb. Weight 0.9 kilograms. Traits: increased concealment in all terrains plus 13. Richter placed his hands on the cloak and felt the fabric. The smooth cloth molded to his skin. It almost seemed to anticipate his movements. Putting it on completely, he found that it reached down past his calves. The molding quality of the cloak kept it close to his body as he moved. At the same time, it was light as a feather, and when he extended his arms, it easily fell away. It would be perfect for either stealth or battle. Once again, I am overwhelmed by your generosity, Richter said, his irritation forgotten as he played with his new and latest toy.
Fight well, Richter. Enjoy our gifts.
A wry expression found its way onto the Hearth-Mother's face. Richter smiled back. Thank you again. There were one or two other things I would like to discuss. Master to master, so to speak. Hisako nodded.
Daniela, take Scion to his armor. The rest of you, thank you for your help. I will speak with Lord Richter alone.
Everyone began to shuffle away. Scion and Daniela appeared to be arguing good-naturedly as soon as they started walking together. In a short period of time, Hisako and Richter were alone in the sea of golden grass. They walked leisurely through the meadow. The grass reacted to the Hearth-Mother's presence, both bending out of her way and also caressing her outstretched hands.
What did you wish to discuss? She asked.
First, I'm guessing from your surprise that Scion did not tell you about that battle with the skeeling?
No, I had no knowledge of this. I have never heard of a skeeling any larger than a raccoon.
Well, to make a long story short, we found an offshoot. Scion said it was a baby hearth tree or something like that. The seed core was still active, and a skeeling had been feeding off of its energy. It had grown to the size of a bear. We killed it and skinned it. Once it was dead, we were able to recover the seed core. I'm sure there is still a lot I don't know about it, Richter continued. But Scion told me that it could grow into any number of magical trees. He also told me that you would not mind me planting it in my village. With that being said, I can only imagine what an amazing asset it could be for my village. Whatever benefits the tree might provide, however, your friendship is more important to me. The seed core seems like a relic of your people. I will give it to you if you want. Richter pulled the brown sphere from his bag. The green veins pulsed with light. Once more he was filled with a feeling of contentment, and the smell of warm rain on grass filled his nose. Hisako raised a hand to reject his offer.
My son was correct. If the forest led you to the seed core, then it belongs with you. But,
a speculative look crossed her timeless features,
perhaps we can help one another. Your mist village is the physical manifestation of your place of power, much as the hearth tree is the physical manifestation of mine. I am guessing that your village is still at level 1. Having progressed my place of power past level 1, I have access to certain high-level spells that you do not. As both of our places of power share a life ley line, there shouldn't be any unforeseen consequences.
Okay, you lost me. What do you mean by consequences? Richter asked.
It is never a good idea to recklessly blend magic of different types. It can cause short or long-term effects that might be good or ill. To fully explain would take years of study, but an example is casting Heal on a zombie. A spell of life cast upon a creature of death can have the opposite effect. In this case, casting Heal actually harms the zombie because it is undead. The same spell might heal a vampire, however, because it is living dead. As you can see, the details can get quite frustrating and irritating. It is best not to imbue an already powerful relic with a blessing that just might negatively react with the massive powers your village is built upon.
Makes sense, Richter said. So what blessing did you have in mind?
There are several, but what I suggest is the life spell Blessing of Growth. Seed cores grow much quicker than other trees, but it would still take years for even a level 1 tree to develop. I can advance the immediate growth past level 1, which would equate to 10 to 15 years of growth. Blessing of Growth is also the best because we do not know what type of tree will be made, and growth will be universally helpful. I don't know if Scion explained, but seed cores create whichever type of tree best serves the needs of the lives around it. We can almost be assured it will be a strong tree, though, if you plant it at your place of power.
I will trust your judgment. This growth blessing sounds wonderful, but you mentioned that I could help you as well. What can I do?
I am sure you remembered the chrysalis from the staff?
Richter nodded.
Unfortunately, we have been unable to revive the royal pixie inside. I can only deduce that the pixie has been in stasis for too long. That, coupled with the chrysalis being used to fuel that evil weapon, must have made its life spark wane dangerously low. We need an infusion of life energy to safely extract it from the chrysalis. A seed core is one of the purest expressions of life magic that I know. Unfortunately, the hearth tree will not make another for at least 100 years. That is why I need your help. When a seed core is planted, it releases an amazing amount of life energy. You can save the pixie trapped in the chrysalis. Will you help?
The normally calm sprite leader looked almost stricken in her need to save the trapped pixie. You have been offered a quest, Resurgence of Light 1. The pixie race was destroyed many years ago by a magical plague. One chrysalis has been recovered. One last light has been preserved. When you plant the seed core at the Mist Village, will you help Hisako birth the royal pixie chrysalis? Reward unknown. Yes or no? Richter nodded at Hisako.
Of course I will help. She exhaled a sigh of relief. Thank you. The ceremony for the blessing will take place tomorrow morning. I will need to use all the mana that can be generated by my place of power, and I have already used a large amount to enhance your armor. My stores will replenish by the morning. As long as we get the seed core planted within a week, the blessing will last. While you wait today, I have a suggestion. You should work with Yoshi. He is an adept in swordsmanship and will be able to teach you how to use that sword on your back.
Thank you. I would be honored, Richter said in a somewhat surprised tone. It never occurred to him that the diminutive sprites would have a high-level swordsman. The sprite smiled and turned to leave, but before he let Hisako slip away, there was one last piece of business to address. Do you know where the bugbear and goblin camp is yet? Hisako sighed.
We are looking, but so far we have found nothing. We must be cautious, though. The bugbears have been sending out patrols of their own. We have already had several skirmishes. Thankfully, none of my people have been seriously wounded. Don't worry. We know they are to the east, so there are only so many places they can hide, but still it is difficult for some reason. I will let you know soon, hopefully.
Richter nodded, and the two of them walked back through the tall grasses. Once they reached the hearth tree, Hisako took her leave. As she was walking away, she called out to another sprite to bring the sword adept. She also looked back and said,
Do not worry about returning your old armor. I have a feeling it might come in handy for you to have a spare set. Also, she paused, you might want to put on your new armor now.
The last was said with what could only be described as a devilish grin on her face. With that parting rejoinder, she walked away. A little confused as to why he would need stronger armor in the heart of the wood sprite's defenses, he still took her advice. Once that was done, he stowed his old armor in his bag of holding. It took up a ridiculous amount of slots in the 20 by 20 grid. He would have to unload it in the vault as soon as he got back to his village. Once that was done, he drew his longsword and took several practice swings with it. The tall grass bent out of his way whenever the sword came near. At first, he thought it was a trick of the wind, but when he intentionally tried to hit the grass, it still avoided the strike. He started a bit of a game, fencing with the grass, which continually dodged out of the way. Despite his efforts, he got nowhere near cutting even one of the tall golden blades. He jumped back with his sword extended and his other arm thrown into the air behind him. With rakish fare, he shouted, "En garde!"
Don't play with it, son,
a gruff voice said.
That's how you go blind.
Confused, Richter turned towards the voice. He was surprised by who stood before him. The sprite was taller than most. Hisako was the tallest he had seen at 4 feet. This man was close to 5. He also lacked the smooth, childlike quality to his face that the other sprites possessed. That may have just been due to the scar that pulled the left corner of his mouth down into a slight perpetual frown, but Richter didn't think so. His ears were also less pointed, and his skin a slightly darker hue. Richter decided to use his analyze skill. Name, Yoshi, half sprite, half human. Level 26. Health 520. Mana 200. Stamina 290. Disposition neutral. Racial blends are erratic in their disposition. They can end up with some or none of any of their parent race's characteristics. Profession, warrior. Level 26. And he had a profession. This was not someone to take lightly. Richter nodded at him. So you are the sword adept?
That I am. Hisako asked me to help you. Is there a reason that you are staring at me like that?
Richter had been closely examining the man. He had never seen a mix of the races before. When Yoshi asked the question, though, he jumped, not realizing he had been so obvious with his observation. I'm sorry. I've just never met someone who was born of 2 races before.
And? Do you have a problem with it?
Yoshi asked with raw ire in his voice. Not at all. I did not mean to offend you. I am truly appreciative of any help I could receive from an adept like yourself. Richter raised both hands in a mollifying gesture. Yoshi gave a loud,
We might as well get started. Hold on to that crowbar you call a sword if you can.
Yoshi picked up a bundle of thick sticks he had next to him and walked over to Richter. He dropped the bundle when he was a few steps away from Richter and drew a 4-foot-long piece of wood from the collection. It was thumb-width in size, and bare patches showed where smaller twigs had been torn off.
Now, attack me,
Yoshi commanded. Richter looked at him with uncertainty. You're not going to use a sword?
No, I'm going to use these branches.
Why? I don't want to hurt you. Ow! As Richter was talking, Yoshi had leisurely raised his stick, and then there was a blur. Richter hadn't seen the man move, but he felt the stick strike him in the side of the head. He grabbed the spot that was throbbing, taking a step back. When he looked up again, Yoshi was standing in the same place with a calm expression on his face.
I am using this stick for several reasons. You have just discovered one of them. It allows me to instruct you without the risk of immediate and irreparable injury. When I give you a command, I expect it to be followed. You may always ask questions, but only after, or time permitting, during the completion of my command. Now come face me and attack.
Richter rubbed his head and glared at the man. He wanted to be attacked? Fine. Richter would give Yoshi a little scar to remember him by. He stomped up to the smaller man. With no hesitation, he lunged forward, sword positioned to scrape the man's ribs. That was the intention, anyway. What actually happened was Richter began to move forward. Yoshi did something, and then Richter was lying on his back. The sword was no longer in his hand, and now his right wrist, both temples, chest, and left leg were all throbbing. It was now very clear why Hisako had told him to put on his enhanced armor. Even wearing it, and with Yoshi only using a stick, this was incredibly painful. Richter heard a long, suffering sigh come from Yoshi.
Banished gods, why have I been sent such a hopeless case? Well, get back up, human. We have a lot of work to do.
Richter's only answer was the combination of a slow exhale.
Hey guys, I hope you just enjoyed these first 2 chapters of The Land Forging. Nick killed it as always. I'm so happy and lucky to be working with this guy. All the books are gonna be on audio soon, and by the time you're hearing this YouTube video, they may already be up. So either way, I hope you guys are having an awesome, awesome life. And as always, peace, love, and the perfect margarita. Bye.